used in a recent Channel 4 programme was via teletext or the web, and he had neither. So, are some viewers being excluded from information only available to a privileged few? We'll be asking the BBC and Channel 4 that question in a minute, but first, Phil questions a couple of the programme editors he has criticised, including our own.
wiseup@channel4.com. World Wide Web at the Channel 4 site on the internet.
The website number
www.channel4.com.
Thank you.
It seems to be everywhere. We're being bombarded by technology. TV seems to be obsessed by the internet, hooked on emails, a slave to the World Wide Web. All this may be very well for those speeding down the information superhighway at 120 miles per hour, but it's still pretty frustrating for those of us still stuck on a hard shoulder, watching the traffic passers by. But the programme makers stop and think about the effect this has on those of us who don't have or can't afford computers, CD-ROMs, modems and huge telephone bills. Even Right to Reply has jumped on the bandwagon, devoting a section of the programme to the reading of comments from its website forum.
Michael posted the following observation. The homicide...
I think we were guilty of that, just reading out website postings in the first few weeks, and the only way you could simply have a comment read out on Right to Reply was to post a comment on the website, and I would agree with that criticism. I did think about whether we should therefore be including comments that were from letters and from phone calls as well, but what I didn't want to do was turn Right to Reply into kind of points of view where you just heard what people were saying. What I want Right to Reply to do is to get people answers. In fact, I asked the Right to Reply team at our meeting this week how many people were online at home, and none of us are. But you know, I think there are plenty of other ways that people can contact the programme in addition to the internet.
To keep in touch with your...
I watch TV with my 6-year-old daughter, and most of the children's TV presenters frequently ask for letters to be emailed. My daughter wants to know why she has to make do with one of those old-fashioned telephone things.
Why can I never get through on the phone to Live and Kicking?
I know, Laurie, it's a problem. We get thousands and thousands of people making calls, and we can't take them all. So there's quite a lot of luck in getting through.
So why don't you spend more money investing in more telephone lines rather than giving so much prominence to the email?
The internet costs us nothing, and what I have to do is I have to balance my budget, you know, that comes in from the licence payer, with how I use the resources, and it would cost a great deal more to put in a lot more phone operators, and I wouldn't get any more calls to air.
Don't you think that by concentrating on the internet you're going to exclude a lot of kids who can't email you?
Well, as far as Live and Kicking is concerned, no child is disadvantaged by not being on email or internet. That's just a bolt-on extra for us. It reinforces the programme. You know, if it's a competition question, they can turn to CFAX, which costs nothing, or if they're lucky enough to be on internet and email, then that's a great help as well. And as far as I understand, the internet is going to appear in every school in the country before long if Tony Blair has his way, and I look forward to that.
All the TV channels seem to be competing with each other to have the best, the biggest, the brightest websites. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not opposed to the idea of the internet. However, if information equals power, we could be witnessing the evolution of a technological underclass being marginalised even further by the tyranny of the internet.
In the studio is viewer Phil Thornton, and to answer his questions are from Channel 4, the website editor, Sophie Walpole, and from the BBC, controller of online and interactive, Edward Briffer, who was previously the editor of the BBC science programme Tomorrow's World. Edward, why is the BBC so keen on online?
We're keen because our audience is becoming keen. The main motive for doing...
No, you've been keen before you were keen before any of the audience got a chance to sample it. So why are you so keen? What's the potential for you?
Well, 3 million people in Britain have access to the internet, and that figure is doubling on an annual basis. Now, that's a lot of people who get it at work, in education, and schools were mentioned just now. That's an important part of our audience, and increasingly at home. And with the arrival of digital satellite television, email and other web services will be available that way.
But what can the BBC specially offer? Why is it of a real interest to you and not just a range of other companies?
I think it's a third broadcast medium, and it's an ability to engage our audience. For those who have access to the technology, and I'm very sympathetic to the issues of feeling disenfranchised, but for those who have access, it's a possibility to get answers to questions that you can't get in any other way. And your daughter, in a few years' time, her school will have it, maybe it's less than a few years' time, and she'll be able to engage in programme makers in a way that isn't possible through mail and through telephone.
Sophie, what about what's the potential that Channel 4 sees in online services?
Well, the main potential is with interactivity. We can experiment with interactivity. We know it's coming, but we don't know what it's going to be like. So at least we can experiment using the web technology that's there now to build services and to deepen our relationships with viewers now so that we can find out what they want in the future.
The key question then, I suppose, particularly for the BBC, is if it's worth experimenting in, how much should you put of licence fee payers' money in? How much are you putting in?
We're putting in, at the moment, about 1% of the income.
Which is how much?
It's of the order of about £15 million.
Is that a year or...?
It's in a year. It's in a year.
So 50 million this year, 50 million next year, and the year after?
We want to move the money according to the audience interest. If the audience see this as a passing fad, I don't think they will, but if they do, we wouldn't move any more money to it. But as the audience grows, as more and more people spend time, and you're starting to see this in America and Britain to some extent, of young men, for instance, spending less time with television, more time with online. You'll see it with children very quickly as the schools take up. Then the money will go with it. So we don't want to lead dramatically. We want to be in step with our audience.
Well, Phil, let me bring you in. Yeah, it's your licence fee money as well, going on something you can't watch. Why haven't you got access to online?
Basically, it's all to do with finance, I think. I mean, I was quoted, I phoned somebody up to see how much it cost me to get, like, a standard kit, and they were quoting something like nearly 1,500 quid, which that's just your setup costs. Then you've got your ongoing costs for your bills and your telephone bills or whatever. So from my point of view is that I think, especially with kids' programmes, that if kids are being enticed into the internet, then it puts a lot of pressure on parents to actually fork out this money.
But there is a fundamental injustice, isn't there? He pays for the licence fee, so he's paying for you to invest in a service he can't get unless he spends 1,500 quid on.
Yep. If we thought that it was going to stick at 3 million viewers, there wouldn't be a justification for doing this. The argument, I think, is the same as the arrival of television back after the war, when what was then a licence fee for radio, some of that money was used to start up television. Now, if the BBC hadn't done that, it would be a chapter in the history books, not the organisation it is today. And our audience would have been very disappointed, and the whole notion of public service broadcasting would have been very compromised.
Yeah, but I think we've heard all this before, haven't we? We've heard, like, Laserdisc were going to be a Brave New World several years ago. You're talking about quite a large investment. I don't know whether that's, you're saying 10 million, 15 million this year. I don't know what it's going to be over that, like, is it like over a 5-year period? Yeah. And I think if it does it to plateau, even if the numbers of people who are using it are doubling sort of annually, sooner or later that's going to hit a plateau at some time. And then I think interest is going to wane, because I think a lot of the stuff actually on the internet is glorified marketing. Now, the original purpose may well have been to discuss esoteric sort of 70s cop shows, and I'm all in favour of that. But if it just becomes some sort of corporate marketing tool for the likes of the BBC, Channel 4 or whoever, then I think people's interest is gradually going to wane, and you could see this investment lost pretty quickly.
If it was just corporate marketing, the audience wouldn't be interested, we wouldn't do it.
But Sophia, the public interest question is paramount, and the fact that this is a licence fee. From your perspective, do you have any questions about why the BBC is going into this so positively?
Yes, well, I think they are disenfranchising people. I think that there are people who can't... There are services on the BBC that people can only get on the web. I mean, I would agree. We always try and make the things that we do on the web are always part of a mix of telephone helplines, teletext, all the other things, so that we can get our message out and provide the best service that we can. But I do think, particularly with what we've known about News Online recently, that money is being taken away from programmes for a handful of people who are online now.
Efficiencies are being made in television programmes to allow the establishment of programmes in online. And I quite accept it is not yet mainstream, but the evidence from America is, I believe, this is not a fad. It's here to stay. It's here to stay because business to business. Most office workers now...
I think that's right, yeah, business to business, but it's sort of, as a broadcast medium, I don't think you're really going to get any longevity from it.
Well, we'll wait and see. I mean, absolutely certain that if it isn't popular with the audience, we won't spend the money. It's 1% at the moment, it's a small sum, and it will grow only if the audience want it to grow.
Well, and of course, Channel 4, I have to point out, Channel 4 is investing money that could be spent on programmes, though perhaps not as much. But the crucial thing, I suppose, is while all this is going on, you mustn't be excluded. Do you get a real sense that broadcasters are only now thinking in certain areas about those people who are on the web?
I wouldn't say they're only thinking about it, but I think that's the bias now, that it's biased towards emails and not through either letters or phone us up on this. Or even faxes, you know, not everybody's got a fax machine, but it seems to be sort of taken for granted that just get on the fax machine, just email us with this. And, you know, for a large percentage of the population, we're unable to do that. I think it's quite frustrating.
Do you think, Edward, that people in broadcasting do get obsessed with the latest technological development and are in danger of excluding, you know, as it were, the traditional means of communication, by letter, by telephone, and so on? I mean, can you put an edict out through the BBC which says, don't just use online, now you've got it?
We're absolutely not operating an apartheid, to use a phrase you used earlier. You know, if you communicate any way we can, sometimes there are problems with the phone, and we understand. I hope you understand why that is. But you'll get through. We'll find a way of you know, answering the inquiry. We're not obsessed with it.
Phil, last word to you. You've now had a chance of looking what's on the Channel 4 web and the BBC web. Are you impressed? I mean, if you could afford it, would you like to use it?
No.
Why not?
I think it's like a charity shop. You know, it's 99% rubbish, and the one thing of interest, it maybe takes 2 or 3 hours to wade through the rubbish to get to the thing that's OK. So, you know, the costs incurred by trying to find that piece of information that's OK outweigh the advantages in my case.
Well, Phil, thanks for that ringing endorsement about the online potential. I'm afraid that that's where we must leave it. Please do let us know what you think about what you've heard in this week's show by any means you like. Our address and numbers are coming up in a moment, including the website URL, which I'm told means Uniform Resource Locator. Whatever you're watching, on whatever channel, we cover them all. So please get in touch. Next week it could be your right to reply. Until then, goodbye. Right to Reply is now on the Channel 4 website, or you can call us on 0171 306 8582. Our address is 124 Horseferry Road, London SW1P 2TX.